Good morning, and today we are starting with cerebrum. So step by step, in next few days, we'll be talking about various parts of the brain. At the same time, we'll also be talking about the very interesting clinical things associated. Now, for today's topic, when I said that there is a secret to boost efficiency, yeah, actually there is a very nice method to boost efficiency of your brain. And because it is associated with cerebrum, so that's why we'll be talking about it, right? So we'll talk about one pathology and then we'll talk about how can you really improve it. And it is so effective, the moment you'll implement it, you'll automatically understand that yes, it is, right? So let's start with the topic. So here is our cerebrum, right? So this is cerebrum. Now, orienting ourselves properly. So this is anterior, correct? This one would be posterior. This is superior and inferior. That one would be cerebellum. And over here, that's the brainstem. So today we won't be talking much about brainstem or cerebellum, right? Because cerebrum is in the focus. Okay, let's cut. Let's cut the cerebrum in this plane, right? That is like this, right? So when we this is that so that is called as the coronal plane, right? This one would be the coronal plane. So when we cut it, right? When we cut it and when we watch it, so it looks like this, right? This is how it looks like, right? What we are trying to understand is that we'll be starting with so much basic and gradually we'll keep on building. So today it will happen like we'll revise the cerebrum 4 times. And the revision would not be like, say, this is this slope, this is this slope. Actually, what I really want is you take 4 blank sheets of paper, and every time we draw, I'll be drawing, you also draw along with me. By the end of 1 hour, you'll be knowing every part of the cerebrum, that is the lateral surface of the cerebrum, very properly. Importance of this is that whenever there is any pathology, so you will be understanding it very crisply, that just by reading the report, CT or MRI report, the picture will start building in your brain that this is how things are. And that visualization is the key secret of your mental success, right? So how to visualize, why it is so important, and why it happens like that at times you'll find that kids, they don't behave very properly, but after certain age suddenly you find that okay, there is so much of maturity. All the secrets, they are lying in today's session, right? So here it is. Understand this is like a coronal section, right? Coronal. To remember, we said that coronal is like crown, right? So how do we wear the crown, right? If this is the face, so that's the crown. So this particular plane, right? This particular plane like this, right? So that is the coronal plane. This one which I have drawn, right? So it looks like this. Things to be noted in this is that one, there is a one over here, right? Can you see that there is a gap, right? There is a gap. So this one is the median longitudinal fissure, right? This one. So that one is median longitudinal fissure over here because it is splitting it. So it is median, right? So that's why we'll say, because it is into the center, median longitudinal fissure. Now we need to see 2 things in this. One, its orientation. Let me reduce those points slightly. Yeah, now it would be better. So one surface is all the way this, correct? This is one. See, it is dividing the whole cerebrum into 2 parts, right and left. One, and this is the central, that is the median, right? And this one is the basal, right? So how are we oriented? Well, it is like this. This one would be the superolateral, right? Superolateral, superior and lateral. That's the area which we'll be focusing today, right? This one would be basal or the inferior. This one is inferior or the basal, right? And over here, this central one, that would be the medial surface, right? So this one would be the medial surface. These are all surfaces. So this is surface, right? Basal surface and the medial surface. It will look something like this. See, when we cut exactly from the center, right? So this is the medial surface. This is how it would look like. Today we won't be talking about medial surface. We'll first look at the outer one, but this is how it will look like, right? This is basal surface. So if we take the whole brain out and then we watch, so this is the inferior part, right? So this is the inferior surface or the basal surface. Done. So let's take our focus back to our original lateral one. Now, two things once again you have to understand. One, what you'll be watching, right? What you'll be watching is only 1/3 of the brain, because the whole brain is thrown into folds. So concept of sulci and gyri. Brain is thrown into folds. Brain is into folds like this, right? And that's how, say, the brain goes. So what's the secret behind it? What's the idea behind it? Why it is done? It is to increase the surface area, right? To increase surface area. Now, if you don't do this, then the size of the brain would be this big, huge. It would be massive, 3 times more than the normal size, right? It would be 3 times. But because it is thrown into folds, so we increase the surface area, because every portion is associated with the neurons. The depth, these gaps, they are called as the sulcus, plural, sulci, right? And the prominence over here, it is called as the gyrus or the gyri. Now, miraculously, the brain is so complicated, but still everything is like mathematics. Everything is very precisely arranged, right? So this highly folded structure, that is thrown into folds, but these folds are having specific names. So that's why now onwards, when you'll draw the brain, you'll know that every fold is having a specific meaning, right? This is the thing. So let's start understanding all these folds. Right now, it is looking like a foreign language, right? But the moment we'll start watching it, that yes, every fold is very specific, right? Starting with first one, something which is absolutely at the center. Think of this one. See this, right? This one. Never forget, and always start with things means about the brain exactly in this order. So over here, when we see this one, right? This one, it is very vital, the classical central sulcus. We'll be repeating this order again and again and again, right? Every time we'll draw, right? First we'll see it on this image, then we'll actually draw. Because our whole idea is that, say, in skull there are bones, and with every bone the lobes are associated, right? There is a bone which is covering it. So this one is frontal, right? Something which is in frontal. So there would be frontal lobe. Then the parietal, right? So that bone is called as parietal. So there will be, in brain there is a parietal lobe. Right? Why to stress with adding more names, right? Then over here, that's the temporal bone. So there would be a temporal lobe, right? Then there is occipital, which is into the back, right? This back, occipital. So these are the 4 important lobes which we are watching. But then there is one lobe which is also called as the fifth lobe, and this lobe is hidden. right? It is underneath. So we have to really retract two lobes, frontal and temporal, and then we'll be able to watch what's called as the insular lobe, right? Insular lobe, which is leading to our their self-awareness, right? All those emotions, right? They are associated with it. So that's the beauty of cerebral cortex, right? So here it is. First, we are coming up with this central sulcus. And this central sulcus, everything whatever is in front, right, that one is nothing but it is a frontal lobe, right? That's the frontal lobe over here. So that's the frontal lobe, this one, right? So first we are focusing on frontal lobe, right? So then obviously this one would be the temporal, then this one would be the parietal, this one would be the occipital, right? Things would come. See the brain. If you look at the brain, this is a pole, right? This is a pole. That pole means that's the area which is having a proper end, right? This is the end of the brain. This is another end of the brain. This is posteriorly, this is one more end, right? So these are they are called as the pole. So this one is called as the frontal pole, because this temporal is like a separate lobe, right? Over here, to see it with more clarity, here it is. See, this is the temporal lobe, and these are the temporal poles, right? That one would be the frontal pole, right? This one would be the occipital pole. So over here, but we are looking from one side. So frontal, temporal, right? Temporal pole and the occipital pole. Okay. So now we are properly oriented, and let's start with the frontal one, right? So here is our lateral view, right? This is our lateral view. And when we say frontal, its importance is what, right? Is it so important? The list is enormous. First, it gives you the motor control, right? Motor control, everything, your motor control, that is all the muscle movements, they are with this. Planning, see how important. When you say concentration, right, that is associated with it. The language, your language is associated with it. One of the best thing is it gives you rational control. Now what is rational control? Rational control is that when you start thinking, right, if your frontal lobe is properly developed, you won't do any stupid things, breaking some things, getting angry, throwing the things, all those irrational things, damaging things, right? When you know that this is a stupidity, but still you do it, so then it is wrong, right? This is the frontal lobe. So frontal lobe is so important. So that's the reason that when you look at someone that he is behaving irrationally, so it is not so that only his behavior is getting affected, but you'll find that all these skill sets will also be very poor, right? You tell that person to read, no, they won't, right? Their language, right? They won't be having very good control over their language, right? Planning, motor control, all these things will be affected, right? So this is very, very important area, right? The thing is that this area keeps on getting developed, right? But by the time, right, when it is fully developed, it is like person has reached to its adolescence. So it is fully developed at adolescence. Adolescence, right? That means by the age of 16, 17, it is, by 18, it is fully developed, very properly developed. Okay, so now let I put more figures. So just copy it, duplicate. So now we'll look at not only the frontal lobe, but also the inside parts of it. And as we are learning neurology, we'll associate anatomy along with the physiology, then with the pathology. So starting with central sulcus. Here is the central sulcus. This one, right? That's the central sulcus. The area which is in front, right? The area which is in front. So that is, right? This is one more sulcus, right? So if we say this one is central sulcus, so this one, it is called as the precentral sulcus, right? Pre-central, and they both are sulcus. That means they are like ridge. The area which is in between, that would be very prominent, right? So that is what is called as the gyrus, right? So if this is precentral sulcus, so we'll call this particular area, right? This one, that area. That is the precentral gyrus, right? Makes sense. This one would be precentral gyrus. Gyrus, prominence, right? So this is precentral gyrus. I'm talking about this area. This area. This area is important as it is controlling your entire motor function. So this is what is called as the primary motor cortex. Now there would be one session where we'll be talking about all the areas very properly, all the areas in depth, right? These areas, they are given numbers and they are called as the Brodmann's area, right? It is called as the Brodmann's area. Do you have to remember those numbers? Yes, you have to remember those numbers, right? So this area, primary motor cortex, it is the area 4, right? It is the area 4. The importance of this area is what you do every day, right? Imagine, say, your face. You can have millions and millions of expressions. Your fingers, right, hand, which is considered as the most difficult thing in robotics, because say you can apply all various types of sensors and motors, but your hand, it can give a hard punch and it can take a flower, right? Such a huge variation. So face and hand, they are given the maximum area on Brodmann's area number 4 or the motor cortex, because the control is very fine. If you look at the back will be given only small area, very small area will be given for the back, because at the most what you can do with the back, right? But face and hand, they are represented large. So that is how the entire body is mapped, full body, right? Body is mapped on area 4, right? That is the primary motor cortex. Definitely face and hand, they are given the larger areas, right? So it is this area, right? This is the area which is sending all those, say, for the motor functions. Next, we'll just copy this duplicate page, right? What I'm doing is I'm just removing the text because it is already onto the previous text, but I'm not removing all those drawings, right? So gradually we'll keep on building. Okay. Now still it's not over, right? So this is the whole, this one is the whole frontal cortex, a frontal lobe, right? Frontal lobe. Let's draw few more, those sulci. One sulci which is going like this. This one, this, right? Another one which is just parallel to this. These two are this one and this one. One is superior, one is inferior, and they are into frontal. True. So we'll call it superior frontal and inferior frontal sulcus. So superior frontal sulcus and inferior frontal sulcus. This particular area which is associated with laughter. Right? Then your working memory. So important. True. And underneath there is insula. So insula which is associated with self-awareness. Self-awareness. Now, because these are sulcus, so there in between there would be gyrus, right? So if I just write it like this, 1, 2, 3, right? See, 1, 1, 2, and 3, right? So 1 is what? 1 is 2 and 3. All three they are gyrus. And very rightly we can tell it superior frontal gyrus, one which is above, right? So it is superior frontal gyrus. Then most inferior, so we call it inferior frontal gyrus. And in between middle one, so we call it middle, right? So not very difficult name, but that's how they are named. Superior frontal, middle frontal, and inferior frontal gyrus. Now this inferior frontal gyrus, it is once again divided. Don't worry, we'll just summarize it very properly. For that, we need to understand that there is someone which is going all the way. See, this is also a very big sulcus, right? That's called as the lateral sulcus. Lateral sulcus, right? And this lateral sulcus has got two ramus, two branch. Ramus means branch. One branch which is going up, this one, and one branch which is anteriorly. So it is this branch, right? So 1 and 2. Let's make it still simpler. We draw it over here, right? And we draw it in a very schematic way, but very scientific way. So here is, now you should draw along with me, right? Because this one thing will make your concept super clear. So here is our cerebrum, and we need temporal lobe, right? So that would be our temporal lobe. So this is first thing. First, draw this. This is what? Central sulcus, right? So that is our central sulcus, right? Before that, it is over here. So this is precentral sulcus. Precentral. All the white things, with white will not write every time sulcus. White is like sulcus, and when it come to gyrus, we'll change the color, right? Then what? Precentral. Then there were two another sulci. One was like this, second one was like this. They were frontal. So this is superior frontal. And then this one was inferior frontal. And We have changed the color because we want to say this in between area. So this was the precentral gyrus, right? This was precentral gyrus. That is our motor, primary motor cortex, right? Primary motor cortex. Then this is superior frontal gyrus. This is middle frontal gyrus. And this lower one would be the inferior frontal gyrus. But again, it is divided into two parts, right? So we take white color and we said that this one will be the lateral sulcus. Lateral sulcus. One branch which is going up and one which is going anteriorly. So we write it like this. This one is ascending ramus. Ascending ramus of lateral sulcus, right? And this one is anterior ramus, anterior ramus of lateral sulcus. Good. So it means it has divided this inferior frontal gyrus into three parts. Right with me? We have divided inferior frontal gyrus into three parts. And this one, which is called as, now we'll write 1, 2, and 3. Right? So what this 1, 2, 3 is, 1 is orbital part. This is the orbital part of inferior frontal gyrus. We are talking about only this area now, right? Inferior frontal gyrus, in which there is 1, 2, 3. That 1, 2, 3 is formed by anterior ramus and the ascending ramus of lateral sulcus, right? And this one is orbital. The second one, which is in between, it is the triangular, right? It is triangular. And third one, which is covering something. So something which is covering, it is called as, the word is opercular. Opercular. So all these are orbital gyrus, triangular gyrus, and the opercular gyrus, and all three are combined together to form inferior frontal gyrus. Inferior frontal gyrus, above it is restricted by inferior frontal sulcus, and below by the lateral sulcus, right? I'm talking about this part and this part. Clear? Now this triangular part, that triangular part, why we did so much of mehnat, right? It is this triangular part, that is area 44 and area 45. These are once again called as, the name behind the scientist, Brodmann, right? These are called as the Brodmann's area. And those, never forget this area 44 and 45, because if you forget it, you won't be able to give answer, because this is the area of speech. Your entire speech is controlled by this area 44 and 45. So as such, if you see that we are talking about the motor cortex, right? But in that, when it comes to speech, right, it is a highly specialized thing, right? The quality of your speech, it is governed by so many things. And in case if anything goes wrong to this area, right? If anything goes wrong to this area, what would happen? Speech would be affected, right? That is what is called as the aphasia. That is, person is unable to speak, person is unable to express. Now, you must have noticed that few people, they are very brainy, but when it comes to speech, right, they find things very difficult. The world's biggest fear is not the fear of death, it is stage fear. It is stage fear, right? So why it happens? All that neuropsychology, right, that is revolving around this part. So this is speech. No doubt there are some pathology also, especially when the terminal branch of middle cerebral artery, if it is affected, right, it can lead to some complications. We'll talk about it, right? It will come. But this is the importance. So here is this area, right? So I'll just write the number. This is 44 and 45. That's the speech, right? So this one would be the anterior ramus, and this one would be the ascending ramus of lateral sulcus, thus dividing the whole thing into orbital part, because this portion is the orbital part, right? It is the orbital part, and then in between is the triangular part, and the posterior one is called as the opercular part. Just this primary cortex, right? It is primary cortex is also the area number 4, right? That is the primary motor cortex. So this is how, when we say that that's the entire thing collectively is our frontal lobe. Now we know that it is so important, right? So important. The next one now coming up would be the temporal one, right? Because it is relatively easy. So this portion would be the temporal, this one, right? We'll draw this thing again, but first let's understand. Coming back to same our original figure, and this time we'll start with the point which is already known to us, and that is the lateral sulcus. So we know this is our lateral sulcus, right? That's lateral, and this is the boundary, this is the edge, right? Things get over here, and this would be the parieto-occipital, right? Parieto-occipital, sorry. That between parietal lobe and the occipital lobe. This one would be the parietal and this one would be the occipital. So in between the sulcus which is there, right? So that one would be, this is like an imaginary line drawn. So that's the temporal lobe, right? Now in temporal lobe, it is divided into two parts. We are taking it now a bit fast because it is seen so clearly. So that's why we say that here it is. This is right, very right. Say so nicely, right? It is dividing. Right. So what name should we give? Because there is one more. Here it is. Here it is. Right? See. No complicated names. Very simple names we'll give. Because we'll give this one, and this one. One is superior, one is inferior, and they are part of the temporal. So why to give any crazy name? So this one is superior temporal sulcus, and below one would be inferior temporal sulcus. Done. The moment we say this, now it is dividing this entire lobe into gyrus. So this one would be superior gyrus. This one would be the middle one, middle gyrus. And this one would be the inferior gyrus. Yes, all temporals, right? So superior temporal gyrus, middle temporal gyrus, and the inferior temporal gyrus. This inferior temporal gyrus, this one, that's the area 22, right? It is also called as the vernix area. It is also called as the vernix area. So now easy. If you really want to draw, right? Now we'll be drawing it bit fast, right? This one. So this one is what? That is the central sulcus. This one was precentral, correct? Then precentral. So this is what we are talking about, the frontal lobe. Then there would be superior frontal, right? Then there would be the inferior frontal. These are the sulci we are drawing. And then that's the lateral one, right? This one is the lateral one. From lateral, there would be the ascending ramus. and then there would be the anterior ramus. So this one would be the ascending, this one would be the anterior ramus, this one would be the superior frontal sulcus, this one would be the inferior frontal sulcus, this is the central one, and this one is the precentral, correct? And then comes the gyrus. So this one would be the primary motor cortex or the precentral gyrus, right? So this one is the motor, this one is superior frontal gyrus, this one would be the middle frontal gyrus, this one would be the inferior frontal gyrus, and this is the orbital part, this one is triangular part, and this posterior one would be the opercular part, and this completes this entire thing is the frontal one, right? Frontal lobe. Then moving down over here. So this lateral, right? This lateral all the way, that is giving us the temporal lobe. This temporal lobe that was divided into two, 1 and 2. So this is the superior temporal, and this one is the inferior temporal sulcus, right? In between we have got the gyri. So obviously the naming will be the superior, middle, and the inferior temporal gyrus, right? Remember area 22, right? That would be over there. Over here, that was area 44 and 45, and motor was area number 4, right? Speech, Broca's area, 44, 45. They are also called as the Broca's area. Right? So two lobes are left out. One would be the parietal, right? This one would be the parietal lobe, and this one would be the occipital lobe, right? And then we'll separate apart the frontal and the temporal to see insular lobe, right? So far, so good, right? All these mappings, they are important to remember, right? You'll automatically know the importance of it. So next one, that's it, right? Now we'll be talking about the parietal lobe. So here is our parietal lobe. Right? Separate out, right? Separate out the, this is what? This is, that one is our frontal lobe. So parietal is just behind it. So we change the color, and here is our parietal lobe, right? This one. So that one is, let's make it slightly dark, right? So this is the lateral sulcus. Extend the lateral sulcus all the way. Let it go all the way back, right? And then that's between parietal and occipital, right? Parietal and occipital, and the lateral would be joining over here. In between, what you are getting, what you are watching, this area, that is the parietal lobe, right? Now things are much clear. This one is the lateral one, and this one is the parieto-occipital sulcus. In between it is this. If this is the lateral sulcus, there is one branch which is going like this above. That is called as the posterior ramus, right? And one more thing, over here, what was this? This was precentral sulcus. Over here, this we have got, and that is what is called as the postcentral sulcus. This one, right? So how easy? See, this one is central. That's central. And here it is. That one, right? That is what? That is the postcentral sulcus. Postcentral sulcus. So postcentral sulcus, the area which is present in between over here. So that would be what? Post-central gyrus, right? Post-central gyrus. And this post-central gyrus is associated with sensory, right? It is with sensory. So here it is sensory. P for P. Parietal is what parietal processes, right? How musical. Parietal processes pain and pressure, right? So that ouch feeling, that is the parietal one, right? So here it is, this area, when we said that this is for motor, right? That was the precentral. So this one is the postcentral gyrus, which is for sensory, right? Achha. On top of it, we are adding those that branch, that ramus, this one. This is the posterior ramus, right? So this is the posterior branch or the posterior ramus of lateral, ठीक, of lateral. We need to add one more, right, which is dividing the whole thing into half. See this one which is going like this one. That is called as the intraparietal. It is dividing the parietal lobe into superior and the inferior. So that's why this is called as the intra. Intra means between two, right? Inside parietal sulcus. Right. So it is dividing. This is, so this one would be the superior and this below one would be the inferior parietal lobules. Right? These are lobules. Let's draw it schematically so it becomes much easier. Right? Because then due to this ramus, there is one area. See, I have to draw it. Right? There is one area which would be defined like this. This area. This. Right? This is superior marginal gyrus, and then this portion which is just behind, right? This one. That is called as the angular gyrus. So let's make it simple. Right? We draw it over here. So let's say this is parietal. In parietal, there is one intraparietal sulcus. So this is intraparietal. Right? So above is superior parietal gyrus, or it is also called as the lobule. And inferior is inferior parietal lobule, right? But this is, there is one branch, because this is what, this is lateral sulcus here, lateral sulcus, and from that there is one branch which is going on, this one, and that branch is because it is going posteriorly, so there is a, this is what is called as the posterior branch, right, or the posterior ramus or posterior branch. And now the, say what you are watching, the gyrus, this one gyrus which is like this, which is round the posterior ramus of lateral sulcus, and then there is another one which is into this area, right? Names have been given to this, 1 and 2, this one and this one, which is going round. It is called as the supramarginal, right? It is called as the supramarginal, right? It is called as the supramarginal gyrus. And this one, it is called as the angular gyrus. Right? So over here, right, if you really draw it, so This one would be the central one, central sulcus. And then we draw all the way, right? And with black, that's two things which we have to watch, right? This one would be the intraparietal sulcus, this one, and this one, which is coming from lateral, that is the lateral one. And how do we decide this one, right? This one, this entire thing, this one, right? So that is supramarginal gyrus, and whatever is left out over here, that one would be the angular. So this A is angular and this is supramarginal. Again, coming back to that high-speed drawing, right? So this, right? It should be scientifically correct, right? Artistically, it's okay. So this one, right? First central. So immediately draw it like, so this would be our frontal. This would be our frontal lobe, right? So that's the central. This one would be the precentral. Then precentral, there would be superior frontal sulcus, there would be inferior frontal sulcus, right? Then we'll come to this inferior frontal gyrus. That would be divided by one. This, right? That one would be the ascending ramus. This and this one would be the anterior ramus. This is ascending. This is anterior ramus of lateral sulcus, right? This one is the central sulcus. This is precentral sulcus. This is the superior and the inferior frontal sulcus. And then we have got the gyrus ready, right? All the gyrus ready. So this one would be the motor. So now we are writing just M. This would be number 4, right? This one would be the superior frontal gyrus. This one would be the middle one. Yes, and then this one would be the inferior one. Inferior frontal gyrus, that is divided by this ascending ramus and the anterior ramus. So this would be forming this orbital part. Then this one would be the triangular part, and then basically posterior one would be the opercular part, right? That was the frontal. Then we learnt about the temporal. So temporal, so that is very, very easy, right? There is not much. All we need to see is 2 lines, right? Tuck, tuck. So that one was superior temporal sulcus, inferior temporal sulcus, and then the gyri like this, right? So this one would be superior gyrus, middle gyrus, and the inferior gyrus. Obviously, all are temporal. That is done. We move on to the parietal one, right? All difficult ones are over. So then the parietal, this is between parietal and occipital. So over here it would be the parieto-occipital, and that's our parietal lobe, right? This one was frontal, and that's temporal, and this one is the parietal, right? That one is the parietal. In parietal, the way we were having motor cortex, so over here there would be the sensory one, right? So this one would be sensory. That was pre-central, right? Pre-central. This one would be the post-central sulcus. And then there is one horizontal, right? Going like this. So that is intraparietal, right? This is intraparietal. And then we have got one posterior branch or the posterior ramus of lateral. This one is the lateral sulcus, right? And it is forming in fact 2. One which is surrounding this, right? And another one which is at an angle. So thus very nicely named. That one would be the angular gyrus, right? That one would be the angular gyrus. And this one, which is surrounding it, right? It is called as the supramarginal gyrus. Supramarginal gyrus. Uh, in many of the areas, I'm not telling you this is meant for what, which number is this, because this entire portion, whatever we are writing, every piece has got a name. Every piece, it has got a specific Broadman's area, right, which is helping for some very intelligent functions. But right now, first you should be comfortable with the complete layout. You know all the roads, all the areas, and then we'll start traveling, right? That what really happens. But by the end of today's show, you'll be getting one very important tip, that what is so which can really integrate things so effectively, and you can do it so easily. Okay, what is left out? Left out is occipital lobe, right? And obviously then the insular part. So here is the occipital one, very sida sada simple, right? Nothing much. Parieto, the between parietal and occipital, right? So that's the lobe which is the posterior most lobe, and that is the occipital lobe. And in occipital lobe, we see that this is a sulcus which is dividing like this, right? Big sulcus going on. The sulcus going on like that. And this is, and this is called as the lateral occipital sulcus. Lateral occipital sulcus, right? We are dealing with now occipital lobe. So that's it. It just divides this whole thing into superior gyrus. So superior occipital gyrus and the inferior occipital gyrus, right? So that one would be over here, and this one would be over here, right? Done. That's how it is divided. Now I hope you are also drawing along with me. Within 1 minute, let's draw every sulcus, every gyrus, right, at a super high speed. Try to draw at the same pace. We'll not be writing full long name, right? Superior to SUPR, temporal to just T, right? But within 1 minute, the whole division, right? So scientifically you should be correct, artistically don't worry much. So here it is, this is, right, our lobe, right? Here it is, the central one. So we just write C. This one, this is like pre-central, right? So we just say pre-central, and then tuck, tuck, two lines, right? This is what? This is superior frontal. This one is inferior frontal. We are just drawing sulci, right? We are just drawing sulci. And then this is the ascending ramus. This one is anterior. So we need to write this one is anterior because it is in front. This is ascending, and done, almost done, right? So just this is our frontal. Moving on to our temporal because it is the easiest. Just draw two, right? This is the superior temporal and this one is the inferior temporal, and then the gyri, they are named along with that like this. Parieto-occipital, that is dividing, it is helping us to form the parietal one. In parietal, vital thing, the way it was pre-central, this one is the post-central, right? So this one is sensory, right? That is sensory, important. Then there is one intraparietal, right? And then we have got the way there was one ramus over here. This is the posterior ramus, and then surrounding the posterior ramus, right? That is the supramarginal, and one who is lying over here, that is the angular, right? So this one, because it is bit odd, that's why we are writing full supramarginal gyrus, and this one is the angular one, angular gyrus, right? This one is intraparietal, right? Finally the occipital one, right? In occipital, just one lateral occipital sulcus, right? So that is lateral occipital sulcus, and that completes, because the name, this one would be the superior occipital gyrus and the inferior occipital gyrus. Similarly, this one would be the superior temporal gyrus, this one would be the middle temporal gyrus, and this one would be the inferior temporal gyrus, right? This is orbital, this one is triangular, this one would be opercular, right? Opercular. Rest names, this one would be the middle frontal gyrus, this one would be the superior frontal gyrus, and this orbital, triangular and opercular, they all are part of inferior frontal gyrus, right? This one would be the primary motor cortex, area number 4, right? This one would be 44, 45, which is meant for speech, right? And done, right? So this is how the layout of lateral surface of cerebrum, right? Achha. Next is insular. By the way, this occipital part, right? Occipital part, this lateral occipital sulcus, because this area, right? How can we forget this area back? Visual cortex, right? So let's add this. It is the primary visual cortex, right? Over here. So this is, and we'll write a number 17, right? Over here, write down the number 17. Number 17, it is the primary visual cortex. Right. Okay, so moving on to this insular. So this is the insular lobe. Insular lobe, along with that awareness, etc. But one feature, right? That feature itself is so tasty that we can never forget it, right? And it is taste, right? But taste, it looks like a very chota word, right? Stylishly, you'll say it is gustatory. Gustatory sensation. Gustatory means taste, right? But looks good. So this is what is called as the gustatory. When we take off, right? When we actually drag the frontal and the temporal, and that's the insular lobe, right? Insular lobe, which is also called as the fifth lobe, right? In between there is central sulcus of insula, right? So this one is central sulcus of insula, which divides both of them, right? One which is called as the short gyrus, and this one is the long gyrus of insula, right? So that's how this insula is arranged. Now you remember, right? By 2 times figure, that's okay. So over here there was Broca's area of speech, right? Broca's area in the frontal gyrus, so in the frontal lobe. That's the area. Right? This is the Broca's area. That is of speech, right? Now usually it is only on left side. So then what about other areas? See, this particular area, right? This particular area is supplied by, terminal branches, right? terminal branches of middle cerebral artery. Now, middle cerebral artery, you must be remembering it. Middle cerebral artery, that was the internal carotid, right? That internal carotid which was continuing, it's a large artery. This is the middle cerebral artery. From here, one another which was going above was anterior cerebral artery, right? Then it was meeting the opposite one, and then there was anterior communicating artery, right? This was the opposite sides apna internal carotid artery. Then it was giving what? It was giving posterior communicating arteries, right? Then there was one choroidal artery also. And then from here, those two vertebral arteries, then they were meeting the basilar artery, and it was dividing into posterior cerebral artery, meeting posterior communicating, and thus forming the entire circle of Willis. No doubt there were pontine arteries and supracerebellar other arteries, they were there, but this is how the circle of Willis. The artery which are like the terminal branches, right? The terminal branches of middle cerebral artery, it is this artery which we are talking about. That is the artery which supplies this Broca's area which is meant for speech, right? So it supplies this Broca's area, and it is for speech. So if this particular artery is occluded for any of the reason, obviously the speech would be affected. But this speech, now you'll see that speech, it is not so that just mouth shut. Speech is a highly complicated function, right? It is a super highly complicated, and not only that, it is, see, animals, they can't speak, though they do have larynx, right? They do have larynx, right? So that's why they can make some sounds, but they can't actually have a language, right? This is the difference. So when it is this Broca's area, right? So when the Broca's area is affected, right? So I'm just doing this. This means if it is affected, first thing what really happens is that person won't be able to complete his sentence, right? So unable to complete sentence. Now see, these neurology as such, it is not that complicated as it sounds like, because step by step, if you keep on learning new things, and when I'll give you the patient's history, you'll automatically start telling you, okay, could it be this, right? So this is an inability to complete sentence. Patient comes and you ask him, kaise aaya? So a normal person would say, okay, we came by cab, or we came by our own car, or anything, right? His reply would be, we, car, cab, we, right? You'll find that there are so many missing components in the speech. Right? This is one, and he won't be able to complete the sentences. Second important point, he'll be missing all the prepositions, the words which are used to form a complete sentence to join. Say for example, I'm going to market, right? When you say I'm going to market, right? I'm in the mall, right? He'll be missing definitely when you say that I am going to market, right? He'll miss this. These prepositions, they will be missed. So I am, go, market, right? That sort of things. This is the reason that this particular area is extremely vital for language. Right? The third thing which you will notice in this is, it's not only that they'll find it difficult to speak, but at the same time, even their understanding is very much affected, right? So understanding would be affected. And this is affected in a very strange way. Extremely strange. These people, they'll be will not be able to do four things, or they'll be finding it difficult to do this. One, the sequence. You give them the sequence, right? They will be finding it difficult for a procedure or method. Say, for example, when it is said that, okay, I want to download a song. So then you'll say, okay, you go to this particular site, you take the URL, put it into this particular software, and then click on download, right? It would be downloaded. Then it will tell you the options under which format you want to save it, and you save it on your hard drive. That is the whole sequence. That is the whole sequence. They won't be able to tell you that. So much so, they can misinterpret. If you say, I'm treating a patient, they'll understand that patient is treating you, right? The sequence might be reversed. This is very, very important. Do remember this. And on top of it, this becomes crazy when you'll find that this person, he is literally unable to speak properly, unable to give the proper sequences, procedure he is not following. But you give him the mic, right? He will be able to sing so good. Singing is not affected, right? Yeah, singing is not affected. Now, as such, if we say that singing means speaking properly, understanding one word after another, this, that, everything said and done correct. And in singing, there might be very complex, long sentences. They'll be able to speak. They'll be able to speak. But if you tell them, you make the sentences by yourself, gone. Right? This is the beauty of Broca's area. And that's why this condition has been given a very typical name. See, Broca's aphasia. Broca's aphasia. Aphasia means difficulty in speaking, right? Or inability to speak. But this is also called as the non-fluent aphasia. When I say non-fluent, it means, is there anything like fluent aphasia? Yes, there is something like when that person is speaking very fluently, but it is not making any sense, right? He might be telling something which is totally irrelevant, right? Something, those sentences, they are not having any meaning, right? They might be coming up with some strange words which are not present in any of the dictionary of the world, right? So this is non-fluent, or also called as the expressive aphasia. Expressive aphasia. So at times they won't be able to come up with a proper word, right? Now, about what I was talking about. This is something which can be utilized for enhancement of your frontal lobe. If you can affect, does this also affect their intelligence? Well, yes, it affects, right? That's why I said that, see, frontal lobe is associated with so many things. The speech area, that is, or the motor in coordination, that is what you immediately come to know. Okay, no, there is something wrong, right? So because these are the centers which are very fine centers. So you tell him to, chalo, you make a signature, right? You write down your name. You tell them to draw something artistically, right? You'll find their hands would shake. Their hands would shake. One of the very fine method, right, is what's called as the calligraphy, right? Because in calligraphy, let's say we write hello, right? So this is a normal hello. But when we write it in calligraphy, right? Calligraphy is where not only you are writing something, but at the same time your hands, they are getting more turns, they are becoming finer and finer, right, for those movements. and that is where there is more involvement of the brain. The second part, and which is 100% true one, you listen to the music, right? You listen to the music. Now I am telling you, you watch music, right? What is that? The difference between, say, if you see the way Adnan Sami, right? He plays that keyboard, right? He'll close the eyes and and not a single mistake, right? They actually visualize the music. So this is the difference between the professional musicians and rest others. What's the difference? When normally anyone listens to the music, they will be using what? They will be using their temporal lobe, right? These temporal lobes. So that is very ordinary. That is the normal thing. That is the temporal lobe, right? Because temporal lobe is meant for the auditory cortex. There is auditory cortex, and we have got vestibulocochlear nerve, right, which is handling all those functions and happy. When it comes to professionals, right, we know that this is occipital cortex. We say occipital cortex is a visual cortex. Whatever the retina is sending, right, it is just processed over there. But wait, there is a difference. It is like when the functional MRIs they were done, right, it was found that professionals, they use occipital cortex occipital cortex. And what they really do, to visualize music. Now this is one message which I wanted to give you. When the question is asked, boss, close your eyes and can you think of that you are the best, right? Immediately the normal process becomes, no yaar, how can I be best? Arey wo mere se acha hai aur wo mere se achhi hai, she can do that, he can do that, this, that, all sorts of thing, comparison. Forget yaar. If it is said that just visualize, who is telling you to apply the logic? That's what we don't do. This is the power of visualization, right? Suddenly your entire perception would start changing. See, it happens like that. Why it was that the person who was unable to speak properly was able to sing very nicely, right? We talked about the motor cortex, right? Okay? We talked about the motor cortex. In our brain, there is a right side and then there is a left side. When it comes to music, when it comes to singing, when it comes to speaking something which is very complex, it is not involving only one specific part of the brain, right? What I mean to say is that even when you hum, right? So this is like you are giving response to music. Right? You are giving response to music. But when it comes to pitch, when it say duck, 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 right? So when it comes to pitch, right? When it comes to tempo, dik chik, and then dik chik, right? The tempo, melody, right? All those things, they are processed by left side. So this is the reason when you say singing, usually we are very shy. We feel like, अरे यार कोई सुनेगा तो क्या सोचेगा? अरे forget यार, forget rest of the world. Singing, it involves multiple areas of the brain, right? Many areas of the brain. Even one day, right? Once we complete all these topics, right? I'll show you some of the fascinating things. And as said, I'll show you only those things which I put into implementation, right? Because it makes a big difference. Say, for example, have you heard of Shiv Tandav Stotra? I think many of you must have heard about it, right? Shiv Tandav. Now, it was made by Ravan, but it is like if you say, remember the whole thing and then you speak, right? Actually, it will start improving the circulation in your brain, right? Because things like jata kataha sambrama brahmanya limp nirjari, now those means you have to really speak with so much of efficiency, otherwise chances of error would be very high, right? And just one shlok, there are multiples one after another, but just one, like the beginning, right? You'll see that as if the sparks are going on. Jata kataha sambrama brahmanya limp nirjari, right? It is like with him, vilola vichi vallari virajman murdani. So all these multiple areas of the brain, they will start functioning with super coordination. I do this just once a day, but it affects amazingly. Now I'm not telling it is only the Shiv Tandav. There are so many, but Shiv Tandav is considered as one of the most complex this stotra, because say as you progress, right, you'll find that those baz effect, right, this baz effect, that is very high to your brain while rapping. Well, that is also, say, the only thing is, one, the content would matter. Content would matter a lot. Now, in many of the rappings, the content is so nonsense, because then in your brain, same things will keep on playing. So yes, rapping, I'm not telling it is bad, right? Because words means in Indian Bollywood, the first song, right? It was way back. If you Google, right, it was by Ashok Kumar, right? That is a great fun. If you listen to that song, Rail Gadi, right? Rail Gadi, beach wale station bole ruk 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 chuk 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 dhaai dhaai lohe ki sadak. The way it goes, right? And it is so fast, way back. But it is for kids. You listen to that, you'll feel like dancing, right? When it comes to Shiv Tandav, right, you'll find that the bass effect is extremely high, like dhagad 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 jwala lala tapa tapa. Okay, so you keep on practicing. You just practice one shlok, and then close your eyes and speak, right? And that would make a big difference. Well, regarding the freestyle rapping, I have not really tried it, so I won't be able to comment too much on it. But I'll tell you the answer of this after some time, right? I'll because it's a new thing, so I'll start. I'll practice it a bit, and then I'll tell you that how do I feel about it. Right? But these are the things which I have tested. I have worked on it since years, and it makes a big difference. Big difference. Right? So the thing is, spend just 3 minutes. I'm not telling you to spend more. 3 minutes. Just 3 minutes. On something. Start with any song you like. Any song you like. There is no need to go for very complex songs. Later on, we can make it more and more complex. But start with something which is simple. But sing it. And literally, don't worry about the word. Right? किसी ने सुना तो क्या होगा? अरे छोड़ो यार. Do it. Right? Once you do it, because say those who sing bilkul bindas, right? They won't be having any problem. But not everyone would sing, right? They'll feel कि यार नहीं, there would be restriction. But that restriction is because you are not tried. Gradually, you'll start becoming more and more confident. This is something which will build so much of confidence. So much of confidence. And who knows, one day you might be better than the original singer, right? Because you are not tested yourself. I was watching that program of Lata Mangeshkar. Now, it's like hats off to that, say, Lata Mangeshkar, that her dedication was so high, right? It's like definitely the God-given gift of voice, but she developed it. Her practice was like 16 hours a day, right? 16 hours a day. So this is when I say that at times what we really watch is the finished product. This is what we watch. We watch the finished product, right? We don't see that how much say patience, how much strain was taken behind that success. So when few emails come के सर याद कम रहता है, right? We don't remember all these points, we forget. That's the reason I say that those draw with me, right? Start drawing. Otherwise, see, all these things could have put it in the form of PowerPoint. Very easy, right? Then it becomes so easy. Ke, chalo, this is all, everything is labeled. Tuck, 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 tuck. You go. Instead of spending, say, 1 hour, 15 minutes, we could have finished it in 20 minutes. But this 20 minutes, right? It is like a sheer waste of time. When you are watching those PowerPoint presentations, right, you will say कि हाँ हाँ ठीक है. Even if you will miss, right, even if the eyes are closed, you will say कि अच्छा ठीक है बाद में देख लेंगे. But when you are drawing it, right, you say कि अरे यार, this was central, this was pre-central, and this is post-central, right? You will never make mistake when you draw it. Otherwise, in exam, in viva, pre, post, everything mixed khichdi. It happens. But if you draw it, I'm telling you, you draw it today 2-3 times. After that, take a break of 3 hours, 4 hours. Right? Take a break. And then suddenly take a piece of paper out, draw it. Right? If anything is missed, right? Dimag mein nahi aa raha, what is that? Take a different color pen, pencil, mark it. Right? Yeah, this is what I don't know. This is what I am missing. Try to remember. Let your brain strain. You'll get the result. You'll get the answer after some time. Even if you don't get it, no worries. Just before you go to sleep, find out, right? Just watch the PDF. Okay, this was the answer. ठीक है. And go to sleep. Next morning, 100%. You will be knowing every piece of it, every part of it. Do this thing. Let's conduct a test on Wednesday. Can we? Because see, there are very few people, right? So that's why I feel like, say, if there are more people, it would be more effective, but doesn't matter. Even if there are whatever the number it is, let's conduct a test on Wednesday. I'll keep on showing you images one after another, right? I'll tell you, I'll ask, what is this? What is this? Right? But you have to just keep on writing that which structure it is. Is the central sulcus, or it is the superior frontal gyrus, or it is the opercular part of inferior frontal gyrus. But that's the answer. You have to just, and just 15 seconds, right? You'll be shown 15 seconds aage, 15 seconds next, and see what happens. If you have revised it, if you have drawn this thing, see how beautifully you conduct in that, you perform in that test. So, want to do it on Wednesday? Or because it would be a great fun when you will start believing yourself that yes, it is very much doable. Because then we are going ahead with the rest of the functions and rest of the topics, because that is the point where we'll be going in actually more detail. Okay, chalo. So definitely on Wednesday we'll be having a test, and in that test, just to make it bit tricky, we'll add few of the easy topics from everything whatsoever we have discussed in neurology, right? So today is day 10. So from day 1 to day 10, no doubt focus would be on this, but some easy things they can be asked from these 9 days, right? It won't be very complicated, but definitely you'll like it. Okay, so thank you so much. And see you day after tomorrow. All the best for your test. Take care. And I'm putting this thing into our shared folder, this particular file. Thanks a lot, and see you next time.